King Kogi here, your friendly neighborhood Caucasian lady. If you haven't grown up eating it or you haven't been introduced by friends or family, dim sum is one of the most intimidating foods to try. I would love to help break down that intimidation factor for you and give you a little bit of an explanation about what you're ordering, how to eat it, all that jazz. If you head on over to my personal YouTube page, it's called King Kogi. I actually do a review of my favorite dim sum restaurant in Toronto. I've been going there since I was a teenager, and of course during Coldemort it made it a lot more difficult, so I did delivery and it was still amazing. But for today on Eatyourkimchi Studio, I'd like to tell you a little childhood story all about dim sum. So a lot of you already know that I grew up with a neighbor named Mickey. I did a video about going to J-Town with her recently, and we had curry at her house. And when I was in middle school, Mickey and her mom and I all went grocery shopping. And for lunch, her mom took us to a dim sum restaurant. Walking into this restaurant was like nothing I had ever experienced before. First of all, it was like downstairs, if I recall. And when you go in, it's like a gigantic, vast room. Something that could host a wedding or some kind of an event. It was filled with circular tables, which was also very unique for me, and every table could hold about 8 to 10 people. There were tiny circular plates and dishes and weird little baskets. Of course, these were bamboo steamers, but I didn't know that. And they were everywhere, all over the tables. There were just 3 of us, and so they sat us at a table with strangers, and I had never before joined a table of strangers to eat a meal. Luckily, the table is quite big, so you're not really sitting with them, you're just kind of sharing this mutual space, but you can see what they're ordering, and you can see all these little dishes on their table, and you're kind of like, what's this? What's that? What are they doing? When I looked over, I saw these white, squishy looking buns. They just seemed like impossibly soft. I saw these like translucent seashells filled with pink on the inside. I find out later it's gonna be shrimp. I saw these little bowls filled with these little rolls that looked like kind of crepes, but like super saucy. I was completely out of my comfort zone and really blown away as to what I was gonna be eating. First, they brought us over a very humble looking white pot of tea, and we all had these little tiny white glasses with no handles on them, which was unique for me too. Waiters and waitresses were zipping around, zipping in and out of like a back room, and they'd come out with these little silver trays, and the trays were just stacked with like dishes and steam and like little baskets, and I had no idea what was going on. Mickey's mom stopped a woman and just pointed and asked for a bunch of these little dishes, and she would just like point at it, and they would just put it on the table in front of us. When had I ever gone to a restaurant when there wasn't really a menu present, where you just picked things off of a cart as it went by? It was almost like a buffet in reverse, like you sit at the table and they bring you the items. I also noticed that even though I saw the same lady come by, she didn't have the same stuff on her tray. Some stuff looked like little tiny custard tarts. Some things looked like they might have been spicy. I couldn't tell what the differences were. In front of me on the table were these little tiny bottles that looked like all these different potions of sauces. So one of them was a soy sauce that Mickey poured for me in a tiny little plate, and then there was like a spicy looking oil, and then another darker one, which I found out later is a type of vinegar. And there were like tiny little spoons, and I just had no idea how to put these together. Later on, I learned that this type of restaurant where people are pushing these little trays, going to the back kitchen and getting fresh items and bringing them out is a very traditional way that dim sum restaurants used to work. But apparently a lot of them don't do that anymore. Instead, you have a piece of paper, and on the piece of paper, you can see the item that you want to order, and you'll write a number or a tally. So if you want 1 of that item, you just write 1. If you want 2, you write 2, and then you hand that paper to a waiter or waitress. They'll bring it to the kitchen in the back, and then they'll bring out the dishes kind of bit by bit or all at once, depending on what you've ordered. Well, you guys, it was shockingly delicious. It blew my little fragile mind. I tried shockingly delicious morsels, things that were stuffed with plump pink shrimp, and they had chewy outside noodle-like textures, but it wasn't quite pasta, and it wasn't quite sticky and gummy. I couldn't place my finger on what this texture was. Of course, a lot of dim sum is made with things like wonton wrappers, things that are made with like potato starch or maybe tapioca starch, things that are kind of more rice papery, so it has that kind of pull, that texture to it. Kind of similar to when you have mochi, and mochi has that pull, that bounce, but not as sticky. This was just a texture that I had never had before, and it was delightful. I had these yellow steamed things stuffed with ground pork and shrimp that you dipped and bit into, and it was like these little mini meatballs, but they didn't taste like the meatballs I was used to having. I had these soft white buns, and when you pulled them apart inside, it was filled with like a pulled pork in a sweet and kind of savory barbecue sauce. I even had to take a leaf and open up the leaf, and inside of it was rice, and I had never seen such a huge leaf in my life. I will explain this leaf in my video on King Kogi, by the way. Oh, and they even had dessert. They had custard tarts. They had buns filled with sweet stuff on the inside. I even had tofu that tasted like almond, but like a sweet almond, and you kind of scooped it out of a bowl. All these things were like, what is going on? This exists? It felt like this underground culture that I had no idea about. Well, now you can see how Foodie Martino was born. I had all these interesting experiences at a young age that made me feel like there was more out there in the world food-wise. And I definitely have a big thanks to Mickey and her family for introducing me to so many different things, along with all my other neighbors who were from different places around the world. And so I was able to eat their food for breakfast or their food for lunch and go, wow, is this Canadian food or it's not Canadian food? Well, it's kind of Canadian food. It was very confusing, but luckily Toronto is such a multinational city. Markham, Toronto, Mississauga, all these different places have different tiny little boroughs. So you can go to like Chinatown, you can go to Little Italy, you can have African food from all types of places in Africa. You can have Indian food from all over India. It's just such an incredible wonderland of food. Later on in life, when I went to Beijing and Taiwan, I had the chance to try dim sum over there as well. And you know, I was pretty blown away at how legit the dim sum was in Toronto and in Markham. I mean, it didn't taste that different. Obviously, the ingredients are different because of that whole like, you know, terroir thing, like where something grows affects the produce. Having an orange in Japan or having an orange in Korea is different than having an orange in Florida or in Toronto. You can't help it. The soil, the earth, the water, how you feed it, that will help change the taste of things. So having dim sum in other parts of the world, of course, has a different taste because they're using local ingredients. But having dim sum in Toronto, it wasn't that far off the mark. It was pretty legit. Dare I say, too legit to quit. Too legit to quit. Please tell me somebody knows what I'm talking about. Please. Now, historically, dim sum was actually made to accompany tea. So people that speak Cantonese might call it yum cha. And I know I'm gonna butcher all this stuff because I don't speak Cantonese or Mandarin. I've only spoken Korean and Japanese, and so they are not the same. So many diphthongs and vowels that I didn't know existed from different parts of the world and different languages. So yum cha literally means drinking tea, and travelers would be traveling through China and they would stop at these little restaurants to have tea, kind of like how we might stop to have a coffee, and they started to invent these little tiny morsels that they could have with it. Apparently dim sum is like 2,500 years old, and it's like historically talked about in poems and songs, and like that's pretty amazing. Nowadays, dim sum is so popular that there are a lot of places that serve dim sum as their only thing that they serve all day long. But there are still places that will only serve dim sum, for example, on Sundays in the morning, or places that will only do it in the morning specifically. It's almost like a breakfast meal. So if you do head off to a dim sum restaurant in your neighborhood, make sure you check their hours to see if they're actually serving all day dim sum or not. So for a first timer going to a dim sum restaurant, it can be absolutely intimidating. So I want to share with you just a few of my favorite items that I order, and I would love for you guys in the comment section to talk about your favorite items as well. And I'd also love it if you let people know what city you're in and maybe the name of your favorite restaurant. And that way people can kind of look it up online and go find it on their own. I apologize in advance for my pronunciation. First up, hargao. These are shrimp dumplings, and they have been steamed instead of fried. So when you're used to having a dumpling that has that crispy exterior, this one's gonna be translucent. That was like that seashell shaped one that I saw. A really good hargao, the outside has not been overcooked. So if it tastes like gummy or it like falls apart and the shrimp is pouring out, then it's been over steamed. Chengfan, these are fat rice noodles. Inside of it, they put either shrimp or they put beef or they might put pork, and it's rolled up like a crepe, and that's steamed. And then they'll often serve that with like a sauce on top that's kind of like a sweet soy sauce, if I had to describe it. Siumai. This is also called shumai sometimes. It's an open-faced dumpling. So it's a yellow wonton looking wrapper, and they put the meat in the center. So it's ground pork and shrimp, and they put it in and they close it like this. At the top you can still see. This was what I thought was a meatball when I was a kid. It's quite smooth and ground up, and the flavors are just fantastic. Lo bakgao, also known as radish cake. Daikon, when it's all ground up, they put it together in like a little flat patty cake that almost looks like a hash brown and resembles a hash brown in texture. And sometimes they'll throw little bits of like meat or like sausage or bacon in there, and they pan fry it. Turnip cake is so good. I never ordered it before because the word cake makes me feel like it's going to be sweet, but it's not. It is savory. Think of it like a savory hash brown. I had one in Taiwan that blew my freaking mind. It's become my bar, like the bar of daikon cake, radish cake, and I fear that I will never be able to reach that daikon cake ever again. I will have to return one day. Luckily I have friends there, Ryan and Phoebe. I'm coming to crash at your place. Lomiji or nomeji. It's like a huge leaf, and inside of it is like a glutinous rice. Glutinous is just another way to say sticky rice. And it's been steamed inside the leaf, and it has little bits of Chinese sausage in it, which I explain more in my video on kinkogi. It smells amazing, and it tastes amazing, and it's so intimidating if you've never had to eat food from a leaf. But don't miss out on it. It's so good. If you'd like to hear my review of dim sum, head on over to kinkogi on YouTube. That's where I'm putting up the video of me chowing down and eating all my favorite types. And I hope I can inspire you guys to head out there and try some of this food because it's so good and it's gonna blow your frickin' mind. Think of it like a Spanish tapas, the way that you're sharing it. It's like little tiny dishes that you share with lots of friends and family. Or if you're like me, you can just eat it alone because you're a foodie. Let me know in the comment section below what your favorite dim sum is, and please, again, share your favorite restaurants and what city you're in, because maybe you'll help someone go out there and explore. All right, guys, how do you sign off from this stuff? I don't know. See you on the internet. I mean, I guess we're on the internet, so. Can we just talk about Loki? I'm not gonna say anything. I'm not gonna do any spoilers. Loki, so